All right, we are live. Okay, guys, I'm here with Austin Petersen, libertarian podcaster, and get this, former libertarian presidential candidate. Is that right, Austin? That's pretty big deal.
It is, yes. I competed in 2016. That was the year Gary Johnson won. It was me, Gary Johnson, and John McAfee who were fighting over that nomination that year. So it's a pleasure to be here, Armin, and thanks for inviting me to talk about this important subject. I think it's probably more important and relevant than ever, considering all the turmoil that's happening, not just in the Middle East, but what's happening here in libertarian circles in the United States. And consequently, it's involved the libertarian president of Argentina. Javier Milei is also a part of this important conversation as well. So I look forward to this discussion.
Well, as a libertarian myself, I get so annoyed that so many people who call themselves libertarian seem to be on the wrong side of this. I mean, just to set the stage for people who don't know how bad this is, let me just actually show this on the screen. Here, look at this. This is the Libertarian Party of where? New Hampshire? Is that right? I'm not American, right?
Yes, Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, yeah.
And what the hell is this? They stand with Hezbollah, and it got 2,000.
It's things
likes.
like these. Things like these are why I decided it was better to just join the Republican Party, because this is a uniquely American problem. Actually, it's not something that you see in libertarian movements in other places around the world. As a matter of fact, the way that you describe how you feel a little cringed out by what you see with American libertarians is a phenomenon that I'm seeing more and more from libertarian movements, true libertarian movements around the world. But you know what I think this has to do with, Armin? There's a simple explanation for it. I think it has to do with what doesn't affect you to some extent is easy to put out of sight and out of mind. And American libertarians, because we have the greatest, most powerful military that's ever existed in all of history, I think when you sleep soundly at night under the cloak of protection of our military, then you're more immune to what happens around the world. It's the isolationism of the United States is sort of endemic to our geography, and it becomes a part of our moral character to a large extent, because there is a natural, healthy instinct of the United States to not want to be involved in every conflict around the world. And I certainly share that instinct from a non-interventionist view. But from an isolationist perspective, I completely disagree. And they tie themselves up into knots to explain their philosophy, their ideology, which is one of true isolationism. And when I say true isolationism, I put that alongside like the anti-free trade views that you see that coincide with this isolationist foreign policy. So they are truly isolationists. They might describe themselves as non-interventionists, but quite often I find that they are very much for intervention when it is in the interest, their own particular ideological interests. So there's a lot of hypocrisy. There's also just a lot of ignorance, and also there's a lot of brainwashing, and there's also a lot of foreign intelligence operations that have been going on since the Cold War and before that Americans are uniquely prone to. The American libertarian movement has this strange juxtaposition of, these strong Austrian free market economic principles, ostensibly, but it suffers from having been brainwashed by communist foreign policy. And I say that descriptively. As a matter of fact, I can comfortably say that American foreign policy from the libertarian perspective is woke without, people could roll their eyes and they can be critical of it. But looking at the philosophical views of American libertarians on foreign policy, it is the oppressor versus the oppressed. The United States and Israel are the oppressors, and Hamas, Hezbollah, Gaza, they are the oppressed. We are the evil interventionist, imperialist warmongers. Now, you would feel comfortable at a democratic socialist rally using, if you didn't talk about anything but foreign policy, say you were an American libertarian, and you could feel comfortable at a democratic socialist alliance meeting if you only talked about foreign policy, because there is no daylight between the two.
Right. But I don't get it, because I thought the point of, I mean, you are an expert at this, so you could educate me. I thought the point of libertarianism is so that we could get the government out of many private businesses and regulating and spending too much money, so that it could save the money to focus on the things that the government is meant to do, which is protect us, security, the courts, police, and having as big of a military as you possibly can to protect us. We're trying to get the government out of areas, many different areas, so that it could be better at the areas that the government is meant for, not to just reduce society.
You would be wrong. You would be wrong, because what you have described to a large extent is classical liberalism. It is minarchism. It is constitutionalism. It is small r republicanism, but it is not anarchism. It is not what you have described is a rejection. You have repudiated anarchism with that statement, with your beliefs. And so the American libertarian movement is heavily influenced by anarchist philosophers. But of course, because American libertarians have had no power and have had no say whatsoever in the American system, they can comfortably sling bullshit about foreign policy, because there is no sword of Damocles which hangs above their heads. There is no responsibility that hangs above their heads. They've had no experience with foreign policy. You see this in the fight between Hans Hermann Hoppe and Javier Milei of Argentina. Javier Milei, spent his life describing himself as an anarchist, an anarcho-capitalist, still defends, Murray Rothbard and many of these people. But Murray Rothbard's acolytes, the people who followed after him, who create institutes in his name, and they despise Javier Milei, not because he's not doing everything that economically that you have described that we should be doing, but because he is in favor of positive relationships with Israel and the United States, but mostly Israel. It would be bad if Javier Milei wanted to be friends with Israel. But it is far greater crime in their eyes to be friends with Israel, because they have what I would label as a form of Israel derangement syndrome. It's like Trump derangement syndrome. And they have caught it, and they've caught it through this communist organization by the name of Anti-Warcom, which Anti-Warcom is run mainly by their mouthpiece, which is Scott Horton, who espouses this philosophy. And because foreign policy is such a complex topic, it's very difficult to be an expert in foreign policy. Rather than doing your own homework or research, what American libertarians have done is that they have outsourced their foreign policy to a communist nonprofit that is entirely bought into a Howard Zinn view of politics. Very much People's Revolution, very comfortable with the Black Panther style, which is fascinating because they're all such cultural right-wingers. They're socially conservative, and they would hate these liberal movements, these communists and socialists, because of the buggery and of the social liberalism which occurs on the left. And yet they are marching with them lockstep. The homos for Hamas and the American libertarians, right? Making out, right? That would be a really good graffiti to put on a wall somewhere. Hans Hermann Hoppe making, that's the horseshoe. That Hans Hermann Hoppe making out with, the head of Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, okay, making out with, but I still don't get it. Like, I'm trying. I just realized all of this just a few days ago. I can still.
It is a long story, Armin.
I mean, you're trying to explain it to me. I'm very confused because, like, for example, here's another tweet by them, by the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, saying Iran and the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire should both be allowed to own nuclear weapons. I mean, do they know that in Iran we have command? I mean, they're libertarian. Why are they supporting Hezbollah and the Islamic Republic, which is the farthest thing that you could get right now from?
Well, because here's the thing. Because here's the thing. You know why? Because Armin, if you're silly enough, or if you're on enough drugs and you take enough drugs, and I know a lot of libertarians, and I know that they are all almost to a man entirely on drugs, then you'll believe things like, here's the thing. If 9/11 was an inside job, Armin, then who's the real enemy, right? It's George Bush, right? Then you can't imagine, because the only people that they've been taught to fear are their own leadership, because we have no, 9/11 was such a shock to our nation because America is an isolationist nation to an extent. Most Americans,
Right.
you'll learn this when you work in the media for a number of years, especially in the legacy media. Americans, can I curse on this show?
Yes, of
Can I
course.
say about it?
Please
Okay.
do.
Americans
Yeah.
don't give a shit about what happens overseas, to largely.
Mm.
Some do. Foreign policy is for a very, very small clique of elites for people to dabble in. Ambassadors, diplomats, right? But everybody likes to play in it because you can sound like an expert while being full of shit. It's the one thing that you can talk about. It's like history. You know, you can talk about it and you can make up anything that you like, as long as you can, everybody can take a set of facts and then put it together and say that this is what it is, even if it's not true. It can sound good. And because people are really effective at communicating, because people don't care what you say as much as they care about how you say it. This is why beautiful women will always be mouthpieces for media and things like that. So the truth doesn't matter. It's how you look and who's cool and who's saying it. That's how ideas get across. It's a popularity contest. It's not what's correct. It's not what's truthful. If that were the case, the ugliest people of society would be in charge. The reason why presidents used to be ugly is because there wasn't television. Once political leadership became a popularity contest and a beauty contest, the standards started to lower a bit.
Okay, so this is what frustrates me. Okay, and again, I'm not trying to be anti-Americans. Okay, I love our Americans. Okay, Shauna, right? I'm not talking about you and other people, Americans here. I'm talking about many Americans who, when you say foreign policy, it's just they're treating it like an entertainment. It's like a game, right?
Yes.
But this might be true in, I don't know, in United States, Canada, and Western Europe. But for us Iranians and for us Israelis, foreign policy is a matter of survival, right? And it's frustrating to see that some Americans, something that they don't even determines their vote, they talk about these things with such passion, and there's so many shows and podcasts about it. But for them, this is just a game. And us Iranians and us Israelis are the one who have to pay the consequences for the poison that they're spreading all over media. So
yes, of course. Well, this is why it's always laughable to suggest that the Jews control the media, Armin, because if they did, they would certainly be doing much better job right now. I don't think that the Jews seem to control much of the media at all. From what I see, is most of the legacy media is hatred of the Jews, with very small exceptions. Most of the world is allied against Israel. Most of the world is allied against the United States. But again, you're sort of hearkening back to that original point that I made, which is that we in the United States, the reason why the things like that happen is I call it the bored housewife theory of politics. We are so fat and we are so distractible and we are so prone to conspiracy theory because we have nothing left to do. We are so bored. We are fat and we are bored and we are looking at our phones and we are dabbling in conspiracy theories. I love conspiracy theories because I just love to kind of unwind the knot to see where things come from. Where did this idea come from? And I like to sort of investigate them. And I see it all the time. I'll find a new podcast and I'll say, wow, they came out of nowhere. And sometimes I think, well, maybe this is an operation. But then other times I'm like, okay, so what is it going to be? Oh, it's another Alex Jones kind of copy, lookalike, right? Because, Americans and the Soviets knew this explicitly. This speaks to American culture. We are heavily prone to conspiracy theory, Americans, because we are, and it's the same reason why the United States is very religious. It's because we are believers. We are a nation of believers. And so this has positive consequences and it has negative consequences. The KGB actually studied this in order to undermine American culture. And what they found is that they could subvert the American culture by spreading conspiracy theories in the United States. There was a KGB general by the name of Vasily Mitrochkin who defected in the 1990s and brought all these archives and shared all of this information that he had from the KGB's records about how they subvert American culture. It's still being done today. That playbook is still absolutely being done today. But Americans, on the positive side, being a nation of believers, right? The healthy communities that you have in our families, our friends, our neighbors, and our communities and our churches, the stability that you see within the American 50 states is unlike the stability that you see anywhere else in the world. So it is our willingness to believe in our independence, and we value our religious institutions, we value our community institutions, because they are what provide the stability that we enjoy in America. The negative side of that, the stability that leads to boredom, that leads to obesity, that leads to an idleness of the mind in some ways, just like an idleness of the body, because we can float on the when you've got such a productive class of 10% of Americans who are doing most of the work. There's a lot that can be that a lot of people who can be trad wives and who can have TikTok accounts for their jobs and their careers. But again, the negatives of this also lead us to conspiracy theories, because if you're sitting around bored all the time, it's much more fun to read about the lizard people than to read the hard facts and the truth about what's going on, because it's usually boring. The facts, the truth is usually the simplest explanation, and it's always the most boring explanation, rather than, to consider that Brigitte Macron might actually be just a very unfortunately unattractive woman who's the husband. It's more fun to think that might be a man.
Yep. Yeah. I mean,
that's it, and that's why. That's where that happens. Candace Owens knows this. She knows it's not true, but she knows it's lucrative because Americans love this. We want to believe. It's more fun.
To be fair to Americans, conspiracy theories are, everywhere. I speak as, it's also widespread in Iran. I think it's a global thing, but I see your point. Yeah. I do want to ask your position regarding, as a libertarian yourself, why do you support Israel, and why do you think, if you do think, that the United States should be supporting Israel financially, military aid, cooperations, defending them when it's needed? Like, if somebody says like, oh, as a libertarian, you should be for less government action, and this contradicts that, how would you respond to that?
Oh, I'm only for as much government as is necessary to protect life, liberty, and property, to protect the ideals of John Locke. And that means that the rest of the world, if the rest of the world isn't operating on those principles, then you have to operate with your spears and shields pointed out. There's no moral equivalence between Israel and its terror-driven adversaries, none whatsoever. Israel, in my opinion, is the civilized, advanced, technological country, and they're amidst. This is what Ayn Rand had to say. She says they're amidst a group of almost totally primitive savages who have not changed for years. And there's this strange hypocrisy with so many who are claiming to be supermen, many who like to flirt with fascism these days, with Hitler, and they like to claim that they are the superior race. There's a lot of love for the Aryan philosophy, Aryan superstitions and myths that were being propagated by people like Hermann Goering and others. But if they were such good, ethno-nationalists, you would think that they would love Israel. You would think that Israel would be a perfect example, suggesting here that they are fighting against a group of it is unquestionable they are fighting against primitive savages. Unquestionable primitive savages. The mullahs of Iran are not an advanced civilization. They are a repressive backwards. That is in history, because the whole of human history is tyranny, of theocracy, of tyranny. The United States is the experiment with republicanism, with individual democratic aspects. And so when we're talking about civilization, which is, I hope, what libertarianism is about, it's about defending civilization, which is, I argue that, liberty is what has created modern civilization. Then it means you have to stand against barbarians. You have to stand against barbarism. And it's so funny, because I'll see these libertarians, they'll be very anti-immigration. They'll say, well, we don't want the Muslims coming to the United States we don't want them bringing their culture to the United States. Well, I'm like, well, imagine what Israel has to put up with. Imagine what, if we in the United States are trying to stop the importation of lesser cultures, can you imagine what it must be like for Israel being surrounded by these barbarians? I'm sorry, but how can I say that I believe in cultural supremacy, and I am a cultural supremacist, right? A cultural supremacist, right? I use that term carefully. And if I am a cultural supremacist, how can I not look at Israel and say that culture is superior? That is, if the rest of the Middle East were like Israel, it would be bigger than the United States and more powerful than the United States. They have more, in some ways, they have more natural resources than the United States, but instead they squander and squalor, just like the continent of Africa.
But what if somebody says, well, it's not our problem, it's their problem?
Well, it becomes our problem when they come to our front door. Some of these people are young enough to have not lived through 9/11. Some of us, many people were not born. They were born after 2001, and they don't know what life was like before. If you missed out on the 1980s as an American, you missed out on a lot. In some ways, I kind of look at the 1980s as peak Americanism, because while we might even be more powerful now than we were then, we were also beloved by the world then. And it wasn't as if we were, totally non-interventionist then. We had interventions in the world. There were coups, there were black operations being conducted. There was Iran Contra, there were controversies and there were problems. But how do we I think the question really is, how do we get back to the United States being seen as a moral force in the world? Well, we're being undermined by within, by the ideologies that you and I are discussing right now. Some of them foreign, some of them domestic, but all of them, enemies of the United States and our ideals.
Well, the way I look at it, and I want to see if you agree with this, is I grew up in Iran. I lived half of my life in Iran. And since childhood, they told us that one day they're going to come. Israel is the little Satan, and United States is the big Satan, and they're going to at some point destroy Israel, and then they're going to go for the United States. And then when I got older, when I studied this, I realized that all of this came from the mixing of the Muslim Brotherhood ideologies coming into Iran before the 1979. Yes,
Qutb, founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. He came to the United States. He was here in the 1940s. He saw American men and women, young men and women, at a dance hall one night, and they were dancing to the song "Baby It's Cold Outside." And he wrote in his diary that this was an example of how disgusting Americans were in our culture, that we allowed dancing in such a way. And then he was tortured in Egypt and killed and became a martyr, and the Muslim Brotherhood has been torturing all the rest of us ever since.
Right. So he had a plan that didn't work out, and that was a Sunni version. But that man met with another man called Nawab Safavi, no relation to me, even though his name is Nawab, right? And he brought those ideas into Iran, and he started something that eventually caused the Muslim Brotherhood ideology to merge with Shia ideology, and Shia ideology used Marxist ideology that was growing in Iran at that time to create a Shia branding of Marxist ideas, and that gave birth eventually to the Vilayat Faqih version of 12-er Shia Islam, and then eventually to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. So the way I need Americans to understand this is that in the Middle East, we had 3 attempts at empire, right? We first had the Pan-Arabist Empire with Jamal Abdel Nasser, and that was defeated by Israel. And then we had an attempt for an Sunni Islamic empire by the Muslim Brotherhood. That was also defeated by Israel. And now we have a third attempt. So the Sunni Islamic empire was a Sunni caliphate. And now we have a third attempt led by the Islamic Republic in Tehran, which is an Islamic imamate, a Shia Islamic imamate, not a caliphate, but an imamate. And all these 3 attempts were trying to create a bloc, just like we had the Soviet bloc against the West back in the Cold War. These were supposed to be political blocs against the West, which would have been much worse than the Soviet Union, I think. And Israel was standing in the way every single time. And now we're seeing an attempt of creating a Shia empire. So the way that the Islamic Republic understands this, and I know this because I've studied this, is that removing the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran was the first phase to get Iran, and then use Iran, and then removing Israel from the Middle East, because Israel is in the way to capture all of Middle East, is the second phase, because just like the Pahlavi in their mind was an agent, was the puppet of the West, Israel is the puppet in Iran. Israel is the puppet of the West in the Middle East, and you need to remove that tumor. And then eventually phase 3 is to go for the head of the beast, which is the United States, because the main goal is to destroy the world liberal order, and Israel is in the way. And I need Americans to understand this, is because the reason why the Islamic Republic and all these proxies are attacking Israel is because Israel is standing between them and the United States. That's why supporting Israel is not just supporting the United States, but it's also supporting the world. Would you agree with that description, the way
I do? And in conflicts like Iran versus Israel, we love to debate about who is right, what is correct, what is morally true. But underneath these debates and these discussions are people who are fighting for survival. This is a classic clash of civilizations, and history is not written by the side that suffers. History is written by the side that survives. I don't begrudge Palestinians for doing what they can to try and protect themselves or their culture. Everyone wants to try and fight for survival and for the future, to try and build a life for their children. It just so happens that their culture is incompatible with the direction that the world is moving and needs to move. So what we are really talking about here, if we're talking about like a clash of civilizations and ideals, is the fact that Islam has not had a reformation similar to how Judaism and Christianity had a reformation. Judaism and Christianity, the more violent aspects, and there were wars, Protestant Catholic wars that went on in Europe for numbers of years between just different versions of the Christian faith. And these things are happening because they want their culture to survive. They want to ensure that they are set aside for the future. But the Enlightenment came along. And in the Enlightenment, the struggles between religions, global religions, were blunted. The struggles were put to the side. There were a lot of there. I would never want to see the French Revolution ever happen again, but there was a reason that Thomas Paine wrote the book, The Age of Reason, because he had seen Western civilization being subverted by their religious institutions. There was a reason why Martin Luther nailed to the church door and said on indulgences that we are tired. Ein Minuten bitte, right? Just a moment. We would like to reform the church. But it was the Enlightenment that was moving forward civilization at that time. Islam did not have an enlightenment. It did not come. Islam has not been enlightened, and the Islamic world has not been enlightened since its golden age. And when they invented algebra, when they were a peak civilization, and since then they have gone into the depths of barbarism, and they've gone into the depths of anti-civilizational views. Palestinians are a perfect example of this. They are an anti-civilization civilization. So they resort themselves to terrorism rather than to accept that the world has become enlightened. And as the world has become more enlightened, they are furious because Sharia law is of course, incompatible with the principles and views of the West. And so they fight back, and they fight back through Iran, and they fight back through their proxies. And they don't really care necessarily about who's right. They're trying to survive, and you could understand why they would. So if you understand their natural instinct is to survive, then you'll understand why they behave the way that they behave. But Israel, they cannot afford to win hearts and minds in every Western newsroom, right? They have to just project inevitability. They have to make it psychologically impossible to even imagine their defeat. And they've done so. I'm very jealous of Israel and how in that unanimity of mind that they have. That doesn't exist in the United States anymore like it did back in the 1980s. Iran and their proxies, they understand Western morality better than the West understands Iran's morality. They weaponize our guilt. They use footage of crying children, bombed hospitals. They don't care about crying children to bombed hospitals. They don't feel that same sense of empathy that we do in the West. I worked at a radio station before this. There was a man whose father worked in China before the revolution, and he told stories about how one day they were paving an airfield. It was in the Air Force, and they were paving an airfield, and the Chinese workers were working. One of them had fallen underneath the steamroller and was directly in front of everyone, was crushed to death, bloody, gory death in front of all of them. It was a disgusting scene. He describes it. And he said that all of the Chinese people there, they laughed. They laughed. They thought it was funny. No one, they weren't concerned at all about this individual's life. We have in the West, we have empathy towards that. We look at individuals. We don't say, okay, oh, just one more, it's just one more body on the fire, right? So then if the East understands that about Western morality, even if they don't feel it, it serves our purposes. We don't care about dead babies. So, but we know they do, and we know that works against them, and it worked in Vietnam, and it's worked in other conflicts around the world, and we have what's called weaponized empathy. God Sod is a philosopher who's talked about this recently. It's one of our greatest weaknesses, and American libertarians suffer from it as well. Weaponized empathy.
Yeah, it's also your biggest strength, because that's what you're fighting for. So that it's sometimes people could use it as their advantage against you, but what's the point of doing all of this unless you have higher values, right?
It is, but I do want to it reminds me, I'm sometimes reminded of a quote by one of my favorite philosophers. His name was H.L. Mencken, and he said he had a very anarchist impulse himself when he said, sometimes it's time to hoist the black flag and begin slitting throats.
Yeah, but that's actually showing empathy, because you're slitting the throats of the people who are coming for your civilians, right? For your citizens, right? That's actually a form of showing sympathy. But I do want to push back on some of the things, if you don't mind, on this stuff that you said. Because I think when you say the Palestinians are fighting back for their lives or their culture, first, I don't call them Palestinians. I refuse to accept the Palestinian identity. I call them Gazans. The problem is actually they're not fighting for that. They're actually because that was offered to them many, many times. They're actually fighting for destroying Israel. These are not two sides, one siding for their lives and the other side fighting for their lives.
I think that they see that as the path. I think that is, yes, nope. They do. Yes, they want to destroy Israel, but they see themselves as not being able to survive alongside Israel.
No, I've been to Palestine. I've talked to Palestinians. If they had to choose between, they would rather. Their priority is to see Israel destroyed. The ones not everyone there, obviously. I'm saying the ones who are fighting. It's not about them. It's not about them surviving. It's not about, the priority is to just see the destruction of Israel and Jews as a whole, to be honest, right? That's the reason why many times they had the option to actually live side by side peacefully next to Israel, and they said no, because they say every time they said no is because the condition was to recognize Israel. And they were like, yeah, no, hell no, I'm willing to suffer more and not recognize the existence of Israel. So that's one issue.
Well, I'm perfectly willing to surrender that point.
Okay. And also when it comes to Islamic reformation, Islam had multiple reformation, and it became worse every single time. Okay.
Well, sure. And we'll call it a deformation then, a deformation.
Right. And I think when we're talking about Reformation Christianity, I'm an atheist, so I know Christians would disagree with me. I don't think Christianity reformed. I think it was Christians who reformed, and not Christianity. And I think the way that you get religious people to reform, as you mentioned, it was the Age of Enlightenment. It wasn't the Reformation. The Reformation actually made it worse. Okay, it was more anti-Jewish, anti-woman. But I think you never get religious people to reform with the scripture that they have. You get them to reform by competing with their ideas with non-religious ideas. And that's why it was the Age of Enlightenment that reformed Christians. It wasn't Christianity that reformed, it was Christians that reformed. But again, I'm saying that from an
sure. Yeah, they did. There were changes to the mythology. There were changes that were made. Fundamentalism, Protestantism, American evangelical conservatism, is not like Protestantism in other countries. It's its own entirely different creation. So I mean, Christianity has in my mind, I think, reformed and improved in many ways, because the Protestant Reformation led to the schism in Western Christianity that created these factions, and the series of conflicts that occurred between like 1500 and
right
1800 were eventually led to a sterilization of, as a matter of fact, one of the reasons why Christianity I think has gone woke is because rather than sort of stopping at a good point, maybe in the 80s and 90s, Christianity continued forward in its path, and Protestantism, and a lot of people are going to Catholicism because Protestantism has embraced woke principles to a large extent.
So I don't see that as, again, I'm not going to push back on this that much, because I just don't see that as reformation. I just see that as internal conflict, enough internal conflicts where it gets them weak enough that the outside non-religious pressures will have more influence on them, right? The more internal struggles they have with each other, the more division they have, then the outside enlightenment values that will force them to, because they cannot compete with the superiority of the enlightenment values, and the internal schism that they have with them, it makes them weaker, and it will make the enlightenment values basically overcome the community.
It sounds like we're agreeing in concept, but we're just maybe we're disagreeing in it might be a semantic issue that we're.
Yeah, it's a semantic issue because I maybe it's me as an atheist don't want to give credit to the religion. I just think that when it comes to Islam, I don't think Islam, I mean, is capable of reforming.
I'm not religious. Yeah, I'm not religious either, but I think it's important. It's important to defend aspects of Christianity to an extent, because it's important to put it in contrast with the other religions of the world that exist. And especially, that's why I don't want to. Well, I mean, especially I think when you contrast it with Islam, but also I think some of my Christian friends get mad at me because I think that there are parts of Judaism that are superior to Christianity, right? The lack of evangelicalism. I think it's actually it's novel to me, growing up as a fundamentalist evangelical, that Judaism doesn't have the evangelical foundation to it. That I think there's something special about a group that doesn't want you to join. That to me is much better for, like, secret society kind of stuff, so if you will. But nevertheless, I think the reason why I defend it is because it's in contrast. Would I rather have American fundamental evangelical conservatism being a dominant religion in the United States, or Wahhabist Islam? No question. I would much rather have the fundamental conservative Christians, as much as I disagree with them, than Wahhabist Islamists.
I am definitely with you there. One last point before we go back to the topic is that there is no Islamic golden age. The golden age, I think it's a misbranding. There is, because when they call it the Islamic Golden Age, they're suggesting that Islam had anything to do with the Golden Age, and Islam had nothing to do with the Golden Age. In fact, that Golden Age was accomplished fighting Islam. All right, like Islam was in the way. Every single the scientists, the poets, the philosophers, they had to go through so many hoops to be able to do the work that they're doing because of Islamic standards back then. And again, back then, it's funny because the so-called Islamic Golden Age happened exactly when the Caliphate was the least Islamic. So it's actually they were actually enforcing Islam the least. So I'm trying to get.
I won't disagree with you on that. I surrender.
Yeah. So I'm trying to rebrand it as the North Africa and Middle Eastern Golden Age instead of the Islamic Golden Age. I don't know if people will. I don't think that's going to sell, but that's what it was, right?
I would be very interested. I would be very interested to read more about that. If you have a book or a Substack or something, I definitely would love to check that out.
Okay, I might make a live stream about it, and I'll send you the link. I do want to go, now that we're mentioning the Middle East, back to, I was going to mention that a lot of Iranians are in the chat were also saying that, hey, a lot of those people who were responsible for the Golden Age, they were Persians, okay? So, yeah, I know that, guys. I know that, okay? So, but going to Iran now, how much are you in favor of regime change in Iran?
Well, I mean, I'm completely in favor of it. It depends on how it's done, I think. I I'm very skeptical of America's ability to nation build and to bring about those kinds of the kinds of positive outcomes. And it has a lot to do with their track record as such, which is not to say that the United States has not successfully done so in the past. There have been interventions that the United States government has engaged in that have gone well. We don't talk about Panama or Grenada or some of these other interventions that have gone well because it doesn't suit the narrative quite frequently. But of course, reality is more complex than most ideologues would like it to be. So I like to look at the truth, even if it disagrees with my worldview. But I'll say that I think it will be laden with, it will be a minefield that will be the kind of thing. I don't know if there are enough Iranians to build a democracy at this point. I'll tell you that one thing that I have heard and read, and I might be wrong, but is that the reason the revolution in 1979 was so successful is because it was broadly supported by the largely religious population of the people of Iran, and that the photographs and the videos that we have seen. Hold on, let me finish, and then you can tell me why I'm wrong, or tell me why I've gotten a mistaken idea of this. But the videos and photographs that we've seen of Persia before the 1979 revolution it was a very small elite class of people who lived there and who enjoyed, education, higher standards of education, liberalization of female rights, and that was not the public writ large, because otherwise, how could the 1979 revolution have and how could the mullahs of Iran hold so much sway still if they are only such a tiny percentage of the population? There must be some widespread support for those ideals amongst the people of Iran, or else it doesn't make sense for why they could have lasted as long as they have. Please tell me why I'm misinformed.
Okay, so first of all, during Mohammad Reza Shah, during both Shahs, Reza Shah and Mohammad Reza Shah, Iran was growing significantly fast by every metric. Everybody was growing. And if you look at if you're talking about the divide between the rich and poor, yes, the divide was there, but it was worse before. Iran, before the Pahlavi dynasty, Iran was almost completely destroyed. The level of poverty, everything was improving during the Pahlavi dynasty, right? And as a libertarian, when you have really fast economic growth, you also are going to get the Gini metric that's going to increase. Like the rich people get richer faster than the poor, and you're going to see a bigger divide between rich and the poor. But the poor were also getting richer faster than ever before. It looked like a miracle. Like the GDP growth, the industry, the technology, the modernization, technology, like it wasn't.
I'm willing to believe all that. I'm willing to believe all that. But where was the popular support for the revolution of 1979? I mean, it's not.
There's no proof.
I could absolutely believe that a small group of ideologically committed individuals would be able to accomplish such a thing. It has happened before, but Iran is such a gigantic nation with such a large and to some extent diverse people. So I have doubts about the possibility of Iran entering a new golden age at any time soon, or that can be conducted externally, because it has to be taken up by the individuals of the people who are there. And I don't know if Iran has that capability. I don't know. I'm just saying I don't know.
Let me go through, because first of all, there is no data that suggests that during the 1979 Islamic Revolution was backed by the majority. You know that revolutions happened with 3% support, and 3% of the people in the streets all at the same time is going to look like a gigantic crowd, right? And if you have 3% of the population that are absolutely determined to take down the government, they will take down the government if they all show up at the same time, right? And the pictures will look enormous, right? But we don't have data for how much public support the revolution had at the time, but we do have right now enough data, not just data, but studies that shows that the divide between the Iranian people and their regime is wider than any country ever studied. The gap between the Iranian people and their government is unmatched in any other country. And
I hope you're right.
Iranian people have the most. Yeah, I have said. I
want to believe what you're saying, but because of my lack of faith in in the population sometimes, I can be much more cynical, perhaps. Listen,
Well-
but ultimately the problem is this: is that when you talk about regime change, I think the first thing people think of is the United States and Israel kicking the door down, overthrowing the government, and installing a new government. That's what people would think. But if a regime, and in that case, I'm not in favor of it, because I think it will lead to less liberty,
that's
not
not what I'm
more.
talking.
Well, okay, but if regime change means that the people of Iran, who are the liberals, who are
Right.
like you and I, who we agree on almost everything, if that is what it comes to, if the people of Iran overthrow their leaders, just like needs to happen in North Korea, just like needs to happen in Russia, if that is regime change that you're speaking of, I'm 100% for it. But the United States is not great at that, and we need to worry about our own problems.
We don't want. That's not what I'm advocating for United States to get involved. However, we are advocating for Israel to get involved, not the United States, but Israel, right? And because the Iranian people and the Israelis have a shared enemy, which is the Islamic Republic, and you guys are an ocean away from all of this mess, so it obviously doesn't make sense for you guys to be as involved in this. But this is an existential crisis for both the Iranian people and the Israeli people, and it makes sense for them to unite with each other to take this evil, especially because they complete each other. The Iranian people are unarmed. Iranian people are extremely liberal. They're extremely forward-looking. Recent studies shows that we have had the largest mass exodus out of Islam, out of any religion actually in the history. We have had half the population of Iran within 40 years leaving Islam, which is absolutely crazy. It has never happened in history, and it's only because they're more liberal and forward thinking and modern. But the Iranian people, they are very brave. They have tried many times to protest and take down the government. However, they are unarmed, and the government is very, very armed. Israel has the weapons. Israel has the best weapons. I'm not talking about Israel coming in and doing a regime change, but Israel could come and weaken the government to the point where the Iranian people could do the final push. It would be the Iranian people's decision to do the toppling, but it does make sense for Israel to come and support them because it's a mutual benefit. It's a win-win for both.
Sounds great, Armin. It sounds fantastic, and all of we have a saying in the United States: "Man makes plans and God laughs." Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of faith in governments to be able to accomplish these things. They need to happen from the ground up. Could Israel be a catalyst? Certainly it could. And if it went according to plan, as you have laid it out, perfectly according to plan, I would love to see such a thing happen. The problem, of course, is that it involves people and requires people, and people make mistakes and things get messy. So my concern is that there might not be enough popular support. You say that you think there is. I hope that there is. I want you to be right. I would rather live in your world than my world. I'm perhaps a little bit more cynical. And if the United States is not involved, I agree with you, all to the better. If Israel is, perhaps to the better. But I think that you're making a very large leap. You're not religious, but you have faith in the Iranian people, and so
based on data, based on evidence. That's not faith.
Share that faith. I don't share that faith because data can be made to say a lot of things. So forgive me if I'm skeptical, and I can be convinced, and you can convince me. I'm agnostic on that question. I'm willing to change my mind with enough evidence, and I will read your evidence and look at it. But I'm inviting you to also consider the alternatives and the possibilities, so that you don't get into the same problems that we had. For example, we tried to overthrow Fidel Castro. We fought at the Bay of Pigs. John F. Kennedy sent the CIA in with guerrillas, didn't send enough guerrillas, didn't have air support, didn't want to have it backed by the American military to ensure the coup happened. And what happened? They got people killed because they had half measures. John F., if you don't know the history of the Bay of Pigs, it's a perfect example of an attempted coup, an attempted regime change, just as you're describing, that did not go according to plan. So I would say, read Sun Tzu and The Art of War. The person who fails to plan will plan to fail. So if you don't have something like that planned out to the letter, to the T, there will be circumstances where you will get to in any fight. And I'm a martial arts instructor. I will tell you this: in any fight, right, the other person gets a say. That's why martial arts, traditional wushu, ba. But you think, oh, I'm going to just stop this and I'm going to do this, and if we have this perfect move, then we'll stop them. But that's not how conflicts end, because the other person gets. Oh, wait. I'm almost done. But the other person gets a veto. The other person gets a say. You think, oh, well, I'll just use this back fist, but he's got an uppercut. So you have to consider these things so that you don't make mistakes and end up going against what you actually want to accomplish. Go, Armin, go.
Okay, let me give me some time to respond to all of that. Okay,
go ahead.
First of all, I think it's okay. I think the word that you should be looking for is skeptical, not cynical, right? And I think I appreciate the skepticism, right? But skepticism shouldn't lead to inaction, and I think you shouldn't be a perfectionist. The idea should not be. Well, let me make my point, right? So if you think that we should know exactly what would happen if we do this, and if we don't know, then we shouldn't take an action. I think that's not how it works, right? I mean, you wouldn't exist as America. You're saying like you're cynical towards if governments could actually help. If France didn't help you guys, you wouldn't have a country called America. If France didn't help you guys, okay. So what I'm suggesting, you give examples of times it went wrong. There are many examples of times it went right? America helped France against the Nazis.
The American people is the American Revolution your example?
Oh, you need to let me also make my point.
I'm just trying to help you clarify. So,
no, I'm just saying Americans helped the French get rid of their oppressors, and it worked, And the French earlier helped Americans to get rid of the British Empire, and now that's the reason why they have a country, right? And I think. All we're telling Americans is that they don't need to get involved, but if Israel decides that it's in the interest of both the Iranian people and the Israeli people to take actions against Israel, I'm not suggesting that we know exactly what will happen. I know how multifactorial this is. I know how complicated this is, but on average, the world is a better place when we take the side and support the people who have the correct values, who have the correct culture, right? I'm not saying if that's a guarantee. I'm not looking for guarantees. It's just more often than not, when the people are taking the right side, you supporting them or at least not getting in their way, on average produces better results. And again, I want to emphasize that when I say the Iranian people on average are, I would say actually, as an Iranian, I would say more modern and more liberal-minded than Americans, actually, right? Because we know, because Americans have taken for granted their freedom. It takes the level of suffocation that the Iranian people are experiencing right now to understand the value of free speech, to understand the value of secularism.
I think you have all of the right philosophies. But I think what you are really missing out on, Armin, and I say this as someone who has great respect for you, I think you are truly missing out on the problems of the military strategy question and how it changes the philosophical debate on things. Because the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. So in Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, he talks about how the ideal victory is won before the battle begins. Direct military intervention is the opposite of this principle, right? Because it risks entangling Israel in an unwinnable occupation. That's not in their interest. Draining their resources, not in their interest. And then uniting Iran's currently fractured factions against a common enemy. A better strategy to accomplish what you and I both want would be to destabilize them from within, like what they're trying to do with us, right? Cyber sabotage, economic pressure, cultural influence, make the regime collapse under its own contradictions, because the regime is not monolithic, right? They have hardliners, they have reformists, they have Generation Z Iranians. I see some in the chat right now. They are restless, they are anti-regime, they're highly online. So you have to win the war first and then go and fight. Right. Don't go and fight then think you're going to win the war.
But that's what we have been doing. So the art of war is not anti-war. The art of war says that you do everything you can to destroy your enemy without war, but it's not anti-war as a whole.
But when you say regime change, I think military intervention as an actual toppling. That's what that means, at least to Americans. When you say regime change, that means Israel.
Americans getting.
Well, I'm not talking about Americans either. I'm talking about Israel. But when you say to an American, regime change and Israel should do it, that means to me that you think that they should use their military to militarily
I
overthrow the
am
government.
saying that. I am saying
That's
that.
the
I'm
law.
saying the art of war. I'm saying the art of war does not suggest that the book of the art of war is not anti-war. It just tells you that you need to do everything you can to win this war without military action, but it doesn't suggest that you should never take military action. Of course,
I'm
that
not
book doesn't
saying it.
suggest
I'm not
that.
saying. I'm not
Right.
saying it does. But I
Right.
think that. But I think that based on our government's but Israel certainly has a better track record than the United States does, at least in recent history for this. So one could posit that they may be able to come up with a certain plan. However, the thing that gives me pause, the reason why I think that Israel's perhaps not prepared for a military intervention is because they're not winning the information war. So if they're not winning the information war,
they're winning the information war in Iran. They're winning the information war in Iran.
Well, then there's no need for it. If they're winning the information war, then there's no need for the military action, because again, you should have your enemy fall to you captured without even having to fight. The fighting only happens.
Doesn't work like that. Now you have too much faith in the power of information. You have too much faith now.
No.
You think it's
Israel,
like magic.
if Israel cannot win an information war, it's not going to win.
You think you could defeat?
It's not winning.
You think you could defend? You could. This is. I think you turned the art of war into like a magic spell that entire militaries will collapse if you just say the right things and do the right.
Did we win? Did we win the Cold War? Did the Soviet Union fall through economic means or military means?
What about the Nazis? Was again just question. Because you have examples. Again,
did the Soviet Union fall through economic? Did the Soviet Union fall because people wanted blue jeans, or did they fall because we invaded Moscow? It fell because they wanted blue jeans and Pizza Hut.
I know, but that's an example. That's
the superior strategy.
You think
the superior strategy is the one who doesn't
if
fight.
That works, okay. If that works, then obviously you should go for that. But what about the Nazis? Do you think do you think America? If it works, but if it doesn't, then you need to take military action.
Correct. Right? I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't. You're suggesting we should take military action. I'm telling you they're losing the propaganda war. And I'm telling you, if they can't win a propaganda war, then they're not going to win a hot war. So you have to win. First of all, Israel has got to get Hollywood. Then Israel needs to call Steven Spielberg. It needs to get Harvey Weinstein out of jail, and they need to get the Jewish filmmakers to make movies that inspire people to love Israel and the United States again. Because all we see right now out of Hollywood is how much they hate Israel and the United States, and the propaganda information war is being lost by the West. Iranians.
That rule does not apply.
Everyone's on TikTok. It's owned by China.
I think you're exaggerating. Okay, I agree.
Perhaps I might be being hyperbolic, but I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah, I think I agree that if you could defeat your enemy with information war, then just defeat them with information war and don't do military action. I agree if you could do that, you should do that. But I don't agree that if you cannot defeat them with information war, then that means that you can also then you will also fail at defeating them in a military action. Because if that's the case, because you keep using the
America
Cold War
won
as an
every
example.
battle in Vietnam. Did America lose Vietnam? America won every battle in Vietnam. America won. There was not a single battle lost.
But that's examples.
But who won the war?
But who won the war? Examples? Do you know?
It's another example. Exactly what we're talking about here. I'm telling you that you have to win the information. If you can't win hearts and minds, you can win every battle, but you will never win the war. You have got to win hearts and minds, or you cannot win the war.
Let's focus on the Nazis. Do you think the Nazis
change the subject? Yeah, don't talk about that.
Because you give me examples. Listen, examples don't make a rule, but contradictions to a rule will show that the rule does not apply. If you're trying to tell me that this is a rule, I need an example to destroy the entire rule, and all your examples will not apply anymore, right? So do you think that there was a way for the Allies to defeat the Nazis only with information, only through an information war, without actually getting
at a certain point in history, perhaps, because in the interwar period, we're talking about alternative history, and you really get into trouble when you ask questions like those, Armin. It's not really a fair question because it relies on hypotheticals, because either one of us can come up with an infinite amount of hypotheticals if you know history enough. Now, you asked me the question and I will answer it, but the answer is, I think, yes, if after World War I, perhaps, instead of impoverishing Germans, we had done what we did after World War II, and we actually helped rebuild the German economy because we were focused on punishing Germans after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. We did help to create the situation where
that actually makes my point.
That is the information war. But that
makes my point, because you're saying if you change the time to a time before the problem got that big, right? So with Iran right now, I could say, well, if before the Islamic Republic revolution you were fighting, you could have actually make sure that this didn't happen in Iran with information war. But just like in Germany, after you screwed up, you fucked up that information war, then the solution at some point became only a military solution. In Iran, yeah, the time to win against the Islamic Republic, the information war against the Islamic Republic, was before 1979. Now the situation is not that again. And again, Israel and the Iranian people have tried every single ass. This is not, it's not like they're going for the military solution just right at the beginning. Everything else has been tried to the max. So anybody that is following,
are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure. The Iranian people have paid.
Well, I'll believe you. I'm willing to believe you on that.
I'll tell you why I know that. Because I speak to the Iranians that have paid with blood, with their eyes, with the torture of their families in front of their eyes, to try to change this regime without actually going into this war. The Iranian people have witnessed their family members being raped in front of them.
Your appeals to emotion. Your appeals to emotion might work on a more simplistic audience, but I'm a little bit more sophisticated, and things like that don't bother me.
This is not just emotion. This is not just emotion. This is reality.
I can't be manipulated by pictures of bodies or tanks rolling over children. My mind is set on what is true and what is right. But not based on the number of people who die here or there, or the emotional police. 12 million Palestinians die from Israel. They say it every single day. So I have to steel myself against such appeals to emotion, Armin. It's really, I don't know. It's very low.
Let me tell you,
it's very low.
It's a specific answer to the question.
I speak to Palestinians every
let me. Okay, I would give a shit. I give a shit about the people. Let me answer you. Let me answer you. Ask questions.
You're a skeptic.
You need to let me answer.
Is the plural of anecdotes data? Does all the stories that I make up here right now, does that all add up to data, or is data data?
It's easy to just ask questions and think like you're winning when you don't let me answer them.
There's not winning. I mean, I hope you win. I'm rooting for you.
So let me answer them. Are you interested in me answering your questions? Okay. So
is
first
the plural of anecdotes data?
Well, let me answer your earlier questions before I get to the later questions, okay? Because I know the tactic of just.
By the way, I'm rooting for you, Armin. I'm rooting for you. I hope you win.
Okay, Austin. Let me answer. Okay, first of all, the children in Gaza dying, they're important. Every single one of them is important, and obviously, this is about emotions. Okay, emotions are important because all our fights are about better emotion. When we're trying to, one reason why I'm a libertarian is because libertarianism increases people's well-being. Well-being means better emotions. Okay, so it's all about emotions. We want people around the world to have the best quality of emotions, right? And also that the children in Gaza are extremely important to me. Their lives matter. The number of them dying like that is a tragedy. Let me make my point, Austin.
Armin,
you're not letting me make my point. Let me answer your question. You ask a question. The reason why that doesn't work on me, because I understand that the murderer of those children in Gaza are Hamas, not Israel. So it's not about them not mattering. I do care about them. I just know who's killing them. And with regards to the cost that the Iranian people are paying, the reason why I list them is because I was answering a very specific question. When you ask me, do you know that everything else has been tried? When I gave you the cost, so this you call this an appeal to emotion. But the reason why I gave you this example, because for me, that is evidence, because when you say, has everything else been tried? When I give you the heavy cost that the Iranian people have paid, I'm not trying to just play with your heartstrings and think like, oh my God, the Iranian people are so poor, so they must be right. No, you misunderstood me. Because this heavy of a price will only be given by people who have tried every other method. So for me, that's evidence that everything else has been tried.
I'm clearly not a pacifist. So if the differences here is it's like a narcissism of small differences that we seem to be having with this disagreement, because your argument is essentially that you think it's time, that they're ready, and my argument is that I don't know if it's time. It doesn't seem like they're ready. I'm more skeptical than you on this front. You're convinced that Iran is ready.
I have
for an
seen
Israeli
the data.
intervention.
You haven't.
Okay, well, have you ever been there?
You're
guessing.
You are guessing. I have an educated.
Does a doctor need to have cancer? Does a doctor? Hey, yeah. Armin, does a doctor need to have had cancer to do operation on cancer? No. Well, then I don't have to have been there to know the difference between right and wrong.
I'm not talking about you being there.
In this section, in this debate, I'm the skeptic.
Austin,
you're the believer. You are a true believer.
That's a strawman. A doctor.
No, you are a believer. You have faith in the Iranian people and the government of Israel to accomplish what you want them to do.
You're running out of arguments.
I'm a skeptic.
You're running out of arguments.
I'm a skeptic.
Okay, let me tell you. Okay.
But I think you're very much a believer.
Okay, it's interesting. I like it how you use the believer as an insult, because I like that. I like that because I'm also an atheist. The fact that that's an insult, okay, that's fair. But that's basically not having an argument. So when I say I know this because I've studied it, and then you compare it to a doctor that shouldn't have to have cancer so that he could treat the cancer, you are misrepresenting what I said, because you're talking about the argument that woke people make that you need to have shared experiences. I'm not talking about you having to been in Iran. I'm not talking about you having to have shared experiences. I'm talking about studying the topic. So in fact, the example that you gave makes my point, because a doctor shouldn't have had to have cancer, but he had to have studied cancer. Obviously, a doctor who hasn't studied cancer is not fit to treat cancer. So that's why would you?
So just out of curiosity, why would you? If are you insinuating I haven't studied the subject?
Well, based on what you're saying, I'm assuming you haven't studied.
Well, why would you bring me? Why would you bring me on to talk about something if you didn't think that I had studied the subject?
No, you're very good at the arguments that you make for why Israel is on the right side of history. And also I don't bring people, and also I think that even if I disagree with you, you present your case very well, and I enjoy talking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't appreciate the insinuation that I haven't studied or spoken to people. I know people who are Persian from Iran.
Okay, first of all, you not studying something is not an attack on you. People can't study everything. Okay,
no, I wouldn't. Well, I mean, listen. Yeah. So I'll admit.
You're a libertarian. I'm a libertarian. You obviously have studied libertarianism way more than I have. I am ignorant on that topic compared to you. Somebody pointing out that Austin has studied this topic more than Armin is not an insult on me. Obviously, no, everybody. I mean, as an Iranian activist, as somebody who's tried to get Iran freed, I would just think it's a pretty fair guess that I have been, as you have been more involved in American politics, I have been constantly involved in Iranian politics. That's what I follow every single day. So I think that's not an insult against you. Me saying that I'm more educated on this topic is just makes sense, and I don't expect everybody to always be educated on every topic. I don't think that's a point against you not to be educated on something, because
sure. I mean, I wouldn't think that you would want to disrespect me in front of your audience like that, but I think that I didn't think I didn't see that as disrespecting you. I apologize if I came across that way. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. So in regards to this, again, I think it is a question of the narcissism of small differences, because ultimately we both want the same things. But what we're talking about here is the methodology in which we could accomplish that thing. You seem very convinced. Please tell me if I'm incorrect, that you think that Israel should play a military role in overthrowing Iran and to install a new type of leadership that will be popular from the American people.
Helping Iranian
am I mischaracterizing? I'm just trying to make sure that I'm correct. Is that a mischaracterization or not?
Almost. It's not that Israel. Okay, so it's not that we want Israel to overthrow the regime. We want the Iranian people to overthrow the regime, but they just need a little bit of a help, because the Islamic Republic is too powerful against the Iranian people. And the Iranian people, there's no amount of protesting or there is no amount of information war that the Iranian people could do to topple the regime, that every single data point shows that the vast majority of the Iranian people want the regime gone, and they want a secular democracy, every single data point shows that, okay?
Man,
And
you know
this is not fake.
my problem is that the more I want something to be true like that, the less inclined I am to believe that it's true. And that is for me as simply a defense mechanism that I have used, like Occam's razor or other philosophical tools. We'll call it Austin's law. And it's because you learn this when you're online and you see so much misinformation and disinformation that you have to create these kinds of psychological traps in order to defend yourself against bullshit and propaganda. And I'm not suggesting that what you're saying is bullshit or propaganda. I'm just saying that this method of thinking has been very useful to me, which is to say that the more I hear something that I want to hear, most people, this is why they fall for politicians. This is why people fall for the Iranian regime. It's because when a politician or when a mullah of Iran tells people what it is that they want to hear, even if they do the opposite, people fall for the bullshit and the lies because they want to believe it. They're being told something that they want to hear. So one of the reasons I'm skeptical of what you're saying, but I'm not saying that you're wrong. One of the reasons I'm skeptical is simply because I want you to be right. I want what you say to be true. I hope that it happens exactly as it happens. I want nothing but blessings for the Iranian people. I wish Iran to be a free country. I hope that if it does happen the way that it happens, as you have described, that it will lead to a freer country. And if that is the case, if it is, Armin, if it is, then I will say absolutely fantastic. Congratulations. You were right. I was wrong. However, the more I find that I want to believe something, the more I get very skeptical and I dig in. You find me being very oppositional on this because I have to ask difficult questions of people who put forward these kinds of things, because when you're advocating for government action, you're speaking to a libertarian. I'm going to be skeptical about that. I'm going to ask questions and ask if every possible method has been used besides government intervention. And then at the final moment, okay, fine, if there's no other way to go. Can you understand my thought processes on that?
Yes.
Or is
yes,
that dense? I mean,
no, you make it, but you keep making it seem like you keep saying I'm a believer, I have faith. But I mean, if I show you data, you keep telling me that data could be made to say anything.
It can.
But
lies, damn lies, and statistics.
But then I think
I don't want to be manipulated.
You don't let me make any points, Austin.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so the thing is that it's true that data and studies are not like revelation, that they're flawless and there could be mistakes in them, right? But they're the best tools that we have, right? So we don't have anything better, okay? We don't have anyone that could come and just reveal the absolute truth to us, right? And I just go based on probabilities. I don't go based on guarantees. Unlike what you're saying, I'm not a believer. I'm going based on the most probable, the most probable realistic belief, justified belief based on the data that we have, right? And given that if we don't use the data and the studies, then we're just guessing, and the guesses are more random than when we apply the data, then I think it's justified. Even if we're wrong, it's justified belief. Justified belief doesn't mean truth. Justified belief means based on the evidence that you have right now, what is the most likely situation? And then study after study after study, data after data after data should suggest that the Iranian people are against their government, that the Iranian people want a secular democracy, that the Iranian people do not want war with the rest of the world, and that the Reza Pahlavi is the main person, that the number one person that the Iranian people support as their leader. And Reza Pahlavi is somebody who is an ally to the West. He has classical liberal values. He's an ally to Israel, which also shows what the Iranian people's way of looking at things are, given that that man, Reza Pahlavi, is the person that they have chosen as their leader. And again, could all of this data be wrong? Yes, they could all be wrong. There's a chance that every single one of them are wrong. However, it makes sense to have this position. It's a justified position to have. And I'm not saying that this is the absolute truth, but this is the rational position to have based on the available data.
I mean, you could be right. I am willing to admit that you could be right. What I'm really trying to explain to you, and I think maybe I'm not explaining my points here in the best way, but maybe this will help us come to a better understanding. Because I think as a fellow non-believer that we are prone to making, I'm going to recommend a book. I don't know if you've ever heard of, you might have heard of Michael Shermer, who talks,
yes,
Michael Shermer, he wrote this. Oh, you would love this book if you have not read it. He talks about the type of errors in thinking that people like you and I are more prone to than people who are true believers, people who believe in conspiracy theories more. And he talks about type 1 errors and type 2 errors. And in that, in the type 1 error, or type 2 error situation, I don't know if you're familiar with it. Like it's the proverbial tiger in the grass. Most people,
right? Yes.
Yeah. So then I won't have to explain it to you. But I mean, but I think that that you have to beware of the type of critical thinking errors that people like us, you and I, ideological kin, that we are prone to because it has led to disasters. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. Yeah. The Challenger disaster is a perfect example where NASA's reports and charts all showed acceptable results for launching the disaster for the craft, but the engineers had a hunch. They were like, I don't think we should really do this in cold weather. They should have listened to their gut. The 2008 financial crisis was another perfect example. Steve Jobs and the iPhone. People love the focus groups. The data showed that people loved BlackBerries, but Steve Jobs trusted his gut, and he went on a hunch, and he said, so there are times, Armin, when I'm asking you, I'm telling you that you have to be careful of trusting data, because data led to a lot of mistakes in COVID-19 crisis. In the United States, they told us to trust the science. Data was used as a tool to oppress us in the United States. So that's why I tell people who are like us, who are skeptics, who are libertarian, atheists, agnostics, to beware of the type 2 errors that can lead us to a crisis, because the type 1 errors from the believers, they always run away. They always think there's a tiger in the grass. Well, they never get eaten, but we get eaten. There's fewer of us. There are fewer skeptics and atheists. Why? You know why? Because we make type 2 errors. And that means that we think it's always a wind in the grass, when sometimes it is the tiger. So that's all I'm trying to communicate here, is beware of making type 2 errors and over-reliance on data to make decisions.
Over-reliance. Give me a better tool. So here's the thing.
Your gut. Trust your instincts.
Okay. There's
absolutely.
I think can you, Austin, give me a little bit of time to actually respond to all of it. Okay. So first of all, I know I've followed Michael Shermer for a while, and I'm also a proud skeptic. Okay. And I think you maybe misrepresent what proper skepticism is like, because you mentioned one book, I mentioned another book, my own book, Why There's No God, because in one chapter of this book I talk about skepticism and then radical skepticism, right? So I am a proud skeptic myself. That's why I don't speak in absolutes and I don't speak in certainties, right? When I look at data and when I look at evidence, what I suggest is that this is the justifiable position to have. If I'm passionate about something, that doesn't mean that I'm certain about something, okay? I don't need certainty. So if you are mistaking my passion for certainty, you're misreading me. I don't have to be certain about a position to be passionate about it, right? So
you are not certain about the position of Israel and Iran ready to... You just spent all this time trying to convince me that Iran is ready for Israel to overthrow its regime, and the people of Iran will raise up, and you use that data.
I'm not certain. I'm not even certain in my own existence. There's no certainty. Okay,
that was not the impression that I got.
Yes, because you mistake passion for certainty. You know, for example, you don't need to be passionate. You don't need to be certain about, I don't know, the love that your wife has for you to be passionate about it. Like, is it possible that everything that you've seen for your wife has all been an act and she doesn't love you? Yeah, but does that give you an excuse to not show passion for this for the love
So
that you
you're
share
not
with each
certain
other.
that this will work or that this is a good idea.
I'm
And
not
you're not
certain
certain on
about
the data.
anything. I'm not certain about tomorrow even existing. I'm an actual skeptic. But the way we do not need we do not. I don't even know if the whole world would exist by next week. Okay, we don't know anything. We
Well, I
cannot
just
be.
in the United States, when someone is very passionate like that, it means that they have. It could be a cross-cultural thing because
So
when someone speaks
no,
on
no,
a
no. It's not.
that we
No, because
interpret that as
no,
certainty.
because if that was the case, then skeptic people would not have any excuse to be passionate about anything. Okay,
No,
so
but
we
I'm just
should not.
saying
We
that's
should.
how it's interpreted
So
by me.
no, well, that's a mistake because
Okay.
then
I've
as a skeptic
I have
person,
willingly
I should.
conceded several
Yeah.
times during this discussion, giving you the floor. I'm actively rooting for you. I guess I don't quite understand like why you can't just sort of
No.
see why
So
where I'm coming from.
Let me tell you why when I see something to be high probability to make people's lives better, I become passionate about it. If you tell me that if we do this, there's an 80% chance, I'm just making numbers up, okay, that people's lives will be significantly better, I'm not going to wait for 100% to become extremely passionate about it. 80% is a very high number, right? And again, you say don't trust data. I don't trust it 100%. I trust it more than my gut. And I think because you give me examples in time where people trusted their guts and it defeated data. And again, you told me that the anecdotes together doesn't make data, right? You told me that right here, okay? And those are anecdotes.
Well, I only used anecdotes because that was the language that you brought up because you're the one who brought up.
I know, but if you look at more often,
your point of view was because you talk to people
more often, Austin, more often. No, I don't just talk to people. I use data.
Okay, but I mean, you said you used anecdotes, so I mean, you can't use your own anecdotes and then say I can't use anecdotes. I only used anecdotes because that's how you decided to take the conversation. You decided to get into the camera, start waving your finger at me that this is what the data says, and I've talked to people about these things, and that's fine.
I wasn't waving at you.
Okay, you were waggling your finger. We can run the tape back.
I'm sorry. I didn't. If it karma cursed like that, I wasn't.
That's okay.
I wasn't trying to do. But the thing is that the stories that I told you are not just stories. They are stories representing data because I also have the data of the price that the Iranian people are paying for this. Okay, but the more often relying on data defeats gut, and also a lot of times people think people rely on their experiences. And that's not gut. Like, I don't know why people talk about gut all the time, because to me, gut is just random feelings. But sometimes people are relying on years and years of experience. And that's also kind of data. It's not just random gut reaction to something. But anyways, I don't want to get into
I mean, I'm not throwing away, I'm not tossing aside all scientific inquiry or study. I obviously place a lot of importance on it because when you're not religious and you're searching for answers about the universe, you do look for data, you do look for information. But I think when we're talking about, again, to go back to Michael Shermer's concepts of these two types of errors, is that it's important for even the skeptic community to do a self-examination on why we make these types of errors. And I think it is because we make these types of errors because it becomes like the atheist left, they destroyed our country because of COVID-19, because they destroyed my country too. They could not overcome their belief in scientific evidence to understand what was common sense, what was truly the right thing to do, not based on the science or the data or the evidence, but on what was morally correct. Those are important. Those are important things to remember. And it's more than just a plural of anecdotes, right? It's more than just data. So I know you say that you'll do better if you always count on the data. I'm not saying that you should always count on your date, but you place more emphasis. Okay, I want to get it right. I'm not trying to mischaracterize what you say, Armin. I want to make sure that I'm correct, but that you should rely on data more than your gut. Is that what you're saying? Okay, I'm not saying that you should. I'm not necessarily saying you're wrong, but I think probably we would be safer, people like ourselves, if we had a more 50-50 look at it, that it wasn't just as heavy on the numbers, because numbers can mislead, but that we also
your gut could mislead more.
It
Guts
could,
mislead more often.
of course it is. But we also we don't want a Challenger explosion, right? If there is a very important time for us to say, is what we're doing really making sense? It seems the numbers point in this direction, but perhaps common sense should also inform our opinions and our viewpoints of things. I don't think this is too radical a concept, and I'm not really even saying anything new. I'm just regurgitating the opinions of skeptics who have come before us.
Yes. So first of all, I do believe that we need empiricism and rationalism both. However, empiricism on average produces better results than rationalism. On average.
Well, of course, the results, the science is going to say that science is always right.
But I'm not dismissing rationalism. Okay. Also, I do think that if you ask Michael Shermer, he also heavily relies on data to come with conclusions. Okay, so Michael Shermer that you keep loving, he also relies on that. So he says that you should be careful about how you interpret data, but he also many conclusions that he has came up with are based on data as well. All right, so I don't know. That's based on when I was with him. And you want to quote?
We're I mean, again, it's a narcissism of small differences here. I think the main point here is your belief, and please, it's okay to tell me I'm wrong. I'm fine with being. I'm okay with being wrong because that means I've learned something. So I'd love to learn something today. Is it truly your belief that you think that the Israeli government should militarily intervene in Iran and overthrow their government using military force, and that you believe that the Iranian people are ready for it and to overthrow that regime, and that now is the time? Is that your argument?
I'm saying the data and everything else that I have seen, and including my gut, if you want to rely on gut as well, points to that being the most likely scenario. Not that this is obviously a fact, revelation from God with absolute certainty, but this is as close to certain as I could get with all the available information.
Well, I could accept all of your data. Assuming I will give you the floor of all of your data is correct. Absolutely, all of your data. You are absolutely correct from a data perspective, but I will disagree with you on the guts. My gut is telling me that will not end well, and it will not result in the outcomes that both you and I want. And that's the only difference that we really have here is just simply that your gut's telling you that data is correct. My gut is telling me that data is probably wrong.
Okay. And based on, so you are very educated on American politics and very involved in that. Okay. And if you value gut so much, based on the fact that I am more involved in Iranian politics and Middle Eastern politics, whose gut do you think would be more accurate here right now?
Well, if I would give you the floor for that. I would give you the floor for that. I would say that if I had to bet money, right, I would probably bet on someone. Again, noting that being completely agnostic on who you are. I mean, I don't know you personally. So, I mean, maybe there is some conspiracy. Maybe you're a foreign plant. You work for, maybe you're being paid by the government of Israel to say all this conspiracy theory. I don't know. There could be a million factors at play, but in an agnostic, completely neutral environment, just considering your stated experiences, I would absolutely side with you more on this, but I don't know you, and I don't know where you're coming from, and I don't know your history, and I don't know what shadows might be lurking behind. So I'm going to trust my gut and say that at this moment, I'm in a wait and see period. I'm willing to give you all of your ground, nearly everything, but suggest that the differences between us are that I think that your gut instincts on this might be incorrect.
Okay. Regardless of me and who I am and what my gut says, would you, if I introduce you to somebody named Reza Pahlavi, right? And because he is easier to research than me because his record is clear, right? Regardless of whether Israel should get involved with military action or not get involved with military action, given that you already think that we should be supporting Israel because they have the right culture and the right values, would you at least accept that if you research Reza Pahlavi, which is the person that the Iranian people is the main person that the Iranian people have picked as the leader of the revolution against the Islamic Republic, right? If Reza Pahlavi is pro-American, is pro-Israel, is pro-liberal values, is pro-secular democracy, then without getting any military involvement, if Americans just know him and support him and mention him, that probably the benefits outweigh the cost. So forget about military action, just more Americans just becoming familiar with who he is and supporting him if he has those correct values. Would you agree with that, at least?
In that scenario, absolutely. Underneath the circumstances that you have described, yes.
Okay. So may I encourage you to, if you have some free time, to look into him and see if
actually, I've heard a lot of good things about him. As a matter of fact, Reza Pahlavi, Crown Prince of Iran, not to be confused with his grandfather, Reza Shah. So I absolutely desire for all the people of the world to be able to enjoy the benefits, the blessings of liberty that we enjoy here in the United States. Why wouldn't I want other people to enjoy this? And that's why I'm so thrilled about what's happening in Argentina, because while the United States is running as fast as possible away from the principles of 1776, Argentina and Javier Milei are running full tilt towards these principles that I admire and believe in. But I have to say that American ignorance towards what happens overseas is a blessing and it is a curse. And the United States, because of our ignorance of foreign affairs and because of our isolationism and our isolationist instincts, it takes time for the United States when it's involved in a conflict to learn enough about the conflict to be able to actually impact the conflict, and typically in a positive way. Because usually what happens is, if you look at World War I or World War II or many of the conflicts that the United States is involved in, there's usually a ramping up period where the United States actually gets their butts kicked. Because the first time the Vietnam War kicked off, nobody knew where Vietnam was. Americans can't even point out American states on a map. They're not going to be able to point out Iran. They're not going to be able to point out. Couldn't point out Vietnam. You have to understand the isolationism of the American mind. And so be careful of placing too much faith in America and the American government. I know you say Israel's a completely different beast, but I am an American. I can only speak as an American. And I would say that beware, because the people who in the United States who may become friends of Reza Pahlavi, they're not people like me. The type of people, they're not people like you. They're people like Hillary Clinton. They're liberal interventionists. They're neoliberals. The type of people who have foreign policy power in the United States are people like Lindsey Graham. These are not the type of people that you want leading revolutions in the Middle East, right? These are not people who can inspire popular support. I'm just saying for the United States.
We don't need them. We don't need United. Okay, so first of all, we don't need the average American. We just need.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not asking. You don't want the average American. You can't have the average American, and you don't want the elite American.
I know, Austin. I know how it works. I know that I'm talking about a very fringe group of people who are the difference maker, who are influential, who are, I don't know, have some media, have some following like you. And again, we don't need, what we're asking is not for these specific Americans, not the average Americans, to come and lead a revolution in Iran. Okay. We just want them to recognize, just know that Reza Pahlavi exists and mention him a couple of times. I mean, that's a very low price.
Well, I mean, you're just asking for someone to spread ideas, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Right. And if you like him, I think it was wonderful. I will look into him. And if he's praiseworthy, I'll offer him praise. I mean, if he's a proponent of liberal democracy in Iran, as is purported, then I absolutely would love to see something like that. I want you to succeed, okay, Armin. And don't be angry at your friend who wants the same things as you. Is saying, you know, perhaps be careful. There might be a pothole in your way. It is the curse of my life. It is a curse. It is a curse of my life to see the pitfalls. And it's, of course, no one can see the pitfalls, what's directly under their nose. But I'm sure that there are plenty of people, if they know enough about me, that they could say, what are the things that are wrong with me? It is a curse to be able to see the pitfalls that other people are about to step into. And so I would just say to just warn you about the potential pitfalls of you might get what you ask for, but you might get it good and hard, and you might not like it in the end.
I appreciate that, and I am trying to learn from you. And it might not look like I'm listening. I'm trying to learn from you, but I am.
No, it is.
Also,
it does.
I'm not,
It does.
Okay, so to demonstrate that I'm trying to learn from you, let me actually tell you this. You say that it makes sense to try to win battles without military action,
fighting.
to try to win without fighting, to try to win the information war. Well, the Islamic Republic is an enemy of the United States. One way to win against the Islamic Republic in the information war is to support Reza Pahlavi. Okay, so I mean, you need to research that. Obviously, don't believe me. Don't accept that.
He's been coming up on my radar a lot more lately, and it's certainly. I think Iranian history in the United States, unfortunately, has been written by liberal leftists, mostly communists and socialists, and so the view that Americans have had of Iran was written by Lyndon Johnson, speechwriter, and his name is. He died, I think, just recently, but he was the man who talked about the Iranian Revolution in terms of a socialist capitalist war, and that the British oil interests in Iran were a primary motivator for Western intervention. See that, but that's their argument. But this is what Americans believe, because this is what we have been. Bill Moyers was Lyndon Johnson's speechwriter, and he produced like the shadow government, secret government documentaries. And American libertarians, this is where you get actually a lot of this, the lies, the bullshit that we were talking about at the beginning of this show from Bill Moyers and LBJ. These are leftists and communists and socialists. And their argument was that the Shah was installed illegally and unconstitutionally because Western imperialists, wanting to oppress the good free people of Mohammad Mossadegh was a liberal Democrat reformer, and he just wanted democracy. These are the lies that Americans have been told by their leaders and by our public schools and by our public education system. So you've got an information war. You've got 10 to 15 wars that have to be fought here in the United States before Americans can even begin to start to crack the nut of Reza Pahlavi, because we're still believing lies and bullshit about the Iranian Revolution of 79. We're still believing lies about Operation Ajax.
I really appreciate that that was a lie. Mohammad Reza Shah had completely legal right to remove him as a prime minister under the constitution of Iran at that time. I really appreciate it. And Mohammad Mossadegh was an Islamic terrorist. Actually, he actually started as the wave of Islamic terrorism, and he was doing the coup. And if the Americans helped, they helped Mohammad Reza Shah against the coup. They didn't help cause a coup. Usually the coups are
correct,
not from the people who are actually in power already. Okay,
right. It's like Israel, right? Like what you want Israel to do, right? It's like that.
I mean, that would be a coup that I would support. Yeah, but I mean, there's three different. Yeah, right. I mean, coup means doing something illegal, right? And doing something illegal against the laws of the Islamic Republic is justified. But Mohammad Reza Shah was not a coup because he was acting according to the constitution at the time, right? Again, I don't want to get into that, but I mean, I need to make a live stream showing people how evil Mossadegh was and how Mohammad Reza Shah was completely innocent.
You do, because I have had to for years listen to the lies and bullshit of Mohammad Mossadegh as the democratic reformer. Right. And they have done. You know what would be a really good stream for you to do is to debunk Bill Moyers and his documentary on the secret government. He died recently, and that's the good news hook for you to use. People were praising him and all of this, but he was a vector point for that lie. So that would be I would watch that all day long. And if you need help with it, let me know. That sounds like that would be very good, and that would be useful here, especially in the United States.
Okay, well, that's good. I will do that because I get pissed off with the leftists. Again, I say this as somebody who lost. I mean, you think that leftists have been bad for your country. We lost an entire country to the unity between leftists and Islamists more than 40 years ago. So imagine how I feel. By the way, the reason I hope you didn't get the impression that I was trying to insult you, or I'm sorry if I came out as disrespectful. I'm just, as you can tell, I've been in the middle of this fight, right? So I'm
trust me,
passionate
please,
about
I
this.
understand. I've been on
Yeah.
that side of things, and I feel the same way. Sometimes I want to go. I would love. You know what? Israel needs, before Israel overthrows the government of Iran. Can they do the United States first and free us from our dictatorship?
You know what? It's not good. You guys have it good. You guys have it so good.
Oh
Come
no,
on.
we're trust
You
me.
guys are.
We could be doing much
You
better.
guys are. Yeah.
I just
Yes.
listen. It's called The Secret Government, the Constitution in Exile. This is Bill Moyers. Mossadegh held power legitimately, says Arash Nourouzi from the Mossadegh Project. I just dropped the link to it in the chat for people to grab it, and you can use that hopefully. I think that this is the vector. This is the vector of lies right here. If you're looking for, it's like COVID-19 patient zero. The Bill Moyers documentary for years was used as the standard for the truth about Iran, truth, quote unquote. And this is what American libertarians believe. This is infecting the right-wing populist movement, which is in power now in the United States. And it is the total Bible of the left in the United States. So if you're talking about fighting an information war, that is testicular cancer right there. I would go right after that.
I will do that. I've already promised that to my audience for a long time, and I haven't done it. Austin, I took more of your time, double the time that I said I would. I'm going to. I have some 19 super chats that I have to go through, and I'm not going to make you sit here and go through all of that with me.
Well, I appreciate
I just
that.
want to.
And congratulations
Yes, okay.
on all of your support. It looks like you have a fantastic audience, and you know what? I'm sure they had fun throwing tomatoes and lettuce at me. It can be fun. Debates are fun.
There were people. There were people throwing tomatoes at me actually. In the
no. But of course, I'm glad. It looks like a very spirited bunch, and I honestly wish you well. And I hope that what you were saying could happen, will happen, because I want nothing but the best for the Iranian people.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to put the link to your Rumble and wait, where is that? In the chat, guys. Make sure you check that out. And the link is also in the description. I need to actually fix the link. The link that I put is wrong. I'm going to make sure that I do that right now before anybody goes and clicks on the current. Guys, don't click on the link that I have right now. I'm going to fix that. Guys, make sure you follow Austin, especially if you're into libertarian. What do you cover on your channel, on your Rumble?
So I'm a great believer in that politics is downstream from culture. So while we do talk about news and hard-hitting political news, I focus a little more on the cultural questions. So for example, we talked about the changing of the Cracker Barrel logo this morning. This is something that is animating American people because it has to do with Americana and the symbols of America. I'm also talking a lot about the Smithsonian. Donald Trump is trying to change the way history is written in the Smithsonian Museum. There's a story that I can tell really, really quickly, but I actually have this flag I was carrying through the American History Museum in Washington, D.C. I lead tour groups to talk about American history. And I was ordered to put this flag away because it might be considered offensive to people. At the Smithsonian, at the American History Museum, the Smithsonian, this summer. What? Yes, because I was told that it might be offensive. I was told this by a guard at the museum. Yes, at the museum. Those are the types of things that we discuss on the show. I try and educate people about American history and about liberty and what it means to believe in economic freedom and personal liberty. And I really, truly hope that if Iranians could achieve what you say you want to have happen, that they would be a lot more like you, a lot more like us, so they'd be a lot more like the United States. Because now we see relationships between the United States and Argentina, they flipped. Right now, instead of Iran being an enemy of the United States, it would be nice to have it be like Japan or Argentina. Right. It would be nice to have positive relationships with Iran, and I think it's possible. Yeah. And I don't think it's possible in Iraq. I don't think it's possible in Afghanistan, but I do think it's possible with Iran.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. So these are Japan and Germany after World War II are good examples of regime change. So it can happen, and I think Iran is ready for that as well. I'm gonna stick around to respond to people's super chats. But again, guys, I fixed the link in the description, so go check that out. And oh, well, my flag is bigger. This is, by the way, do you know what this flag is? This is the flag of Iran before the Islamic.
Yeah,
This is
I
the
think I
actual.
recognize that.
Yeah, because the current flag has Allah in the middle, and we don't like that. This is the real flag of Iran.
I definitely approve. Armin, I'm grateful. Thank you for the spirited discussion. I will never mistake your passion for the thing that we thought it was. Your mistake your passion. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot today, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, me too. I learned from you as well. Thank you so much. Okay, talk to you soon again. Hopefully another time. All right. Bye. All right, guys. I'm gonna go over your super chats. Thank you guys for all. Let me check. So let's see. Shauna saying Americans have a long history of pendulum swings between isolationism and interventionism. You could even argue going back to the founders. Yeah, I mean, actually going through swings is a healthy thing that happens in society, because that's how the society corrects itself. So I think a lot of people, once you go to a certain extreme, they get frustrated. But I think that's just the wisdom of the crowd correcting for something, and every time you're correcting for something, you end up overcorrecting, and it's just natural for that to happen. And I think I don't blame societies for that. I think that's how you just keep growing, because the pendulum keeps swinging, but it keeps getting better. On average, it keeps getting better. I mean, I'm an optimist. Unusual AI, thank you so much for the super sticker. Diamond encrusted Abdullah just gave us a whole bunch of anti-Semitic super chats, which is just so many of them. I'm just not going to read them. Jesus, what the hell's wrong with you, Diamond encrusted Abdullah? Why are you supporting this Zionist channel when you're so anti-Jewish? Sharna is saying it depends on the reform, Armin. There were actually like 3 separate reforms, at least, even from the beginning. Yeah, the reforms you're talking about, if you're talking about the good ones, it's not a reform of Islam, it's a reform of Muslims, because Islam is so tied to the Quran that I don't see if Islam ever reforming for the better, unless you could separate Islam from the Quran. And if you could do that, then it's not Islam anymore. And then we got more crazy super chats from Diamond and Crescent. We're here, and then we had some. I am just Ravi giving us with Shalom Israel, writing that in Persian. Thank you so much. I'm just Ravi. Again, the more crazy stuff from the Diamond and Crescent Abdullah, which I'm not going to read. And then unusual AI saying some Abdullahs have a very strong behavior. I don't know what that is referring to. And then more super chats from I think we're being fully funded by anti-Semites. This guy as well. Yeah, I'm not going to read those. Okay, Pedram saying, Austin, stop jumping in the middle of the conversation. This channel is one of the very few bridges we have with the outside world. Armin is Iranian. We are here. We have been ready for decades. Happy. Well, I think I don't want to speak on behalf of Austin, but Austin will say, I think he would respond to that by saying that's just an anecdote or something like that. I don't know what he would say. He would say, like, he's not just going to believe us because we say it. That's why I keep telling him that I actually have data, but he doesn't seem to trust data as much either. And then we have Pineapple Water saying, Armin is Iran's oracle. Israel lost the information war and will continue to. Americans as a whole are uneducated. I don't think that you're generalizing too much. It must stop the evil Islamification of the ill-informed. I mean, I don't like to be this anti-American, America is a great country. America, I mean, we non-Americans owe America for the world stability. So I mean, it's true that the average American is not very well informed, but that's generally the same as the rest of the world. Like, I don't think Americans are very special in that regards. But thank you for the super chat again and again. Another crazy super chat from Diamond Crescent Warrior. No, Abdullah. And then, oh, you were referring to him, Unusual AI, and then Unusual AI here again saying Austin waving a U.S. flag and having a communist propaganda in the background is hypocritical. No, I think he has that in his background to be ironic. He's against communism. I don't know. I actually didn't pay attention to what he had in his background, but if he had something communistic in his background, I think he was being ironic or that was there just for fun. I mean, guys, I'm an atheist. If you look behind me, you could see something. You could see Mother Mary and Jesus right there. Like that doesn't mean that I'm Christian, right? I mean, I even have the Quran right there, for example. There's a Quran. There's multiple Qurans there. Okay, so that doesn't mean that I'm in favor of that, right? Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. If I see so many people watching this on Twitter, on X, sorry, on X. Wow, it's very busy on X. So I think around 700 people watching this on X. So guys, make sure you come over to our YouTube channel, Atheist Republic YouTube channel, and subscribe. We're gonna have more discussions like this on YouTube. So please come over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Just search for Atheist Republic on YouTube. And again, if you're watching us here on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe, hit the bell notification. We're going to have a lot more interesting conversations like this coming up. And also thank you to Warren. I want to thank Warren for arranging this. I really appreciate the work that you do. Oh, and we got another super chat, so I'll just read this and I'll go. I meant the Christian reform. Oh, there wasn't one reformation. There were 3 competing reforms with love. They weren't all anti-Semitic. Yes, I wasn't suggesting that they're all anti-Semitic. I was just trying to use an example to say that reform doesn't always mean better. That's what I was saying. But yeah, you're right. Anyways, guys, I'm Israel Chai, Javid Shah. See you on the next show. Bye, guys.